The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, offering assisted living and compass memory support with evidence-based treatment for those with memory loss. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. Good morning. It's Friday, May 23rd, 2025. Coming up later, how seized property in a cannabis arrest has netted millions of dollars in revenue for police and the district attorney in Franklin County. Why many nursing homes in the Berkshires are spending less than $10 a day per resident on food, and what the coming unofficial start to the summer has our rundowners thinking about. If you have thoughts on how you plan to spend your summer vacation or on this week's news, hit us up via email, therundown@nepm.org. And here with me in studio to share their thoughts and insights, and on the phone, this week's Rundowners, Dusty Christensen, investigative editor for the Shoestring, Springfield Republican investigations editor Greta Jochem, Mike Dobbs of Focus Springfield, and on the phone, Western Mass Politics and Insight editor-in-chief, Matt Szafranski. Good morning, everybody.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's take a look at our first story. The headline: phone workers worried about lead on old lines wonder who will answer their call. There were two stories this week in the Springfield Republican about this topic, reported by Jim Kinney. He tipped listeners of The Rundown off to this reporting last week on the show. Quoting Kinney's work, inspectors with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration found lead after swiping the hands of telephone line workers in Springfield. They performed the tests after workers rinsed off, but before they headed home to their families at the end of the workday. There's also lead, a neurotoxin that can negatively affect brain function and development, in air sampled from under a maintenance hole at Central and Cedar Streets in January. Federal officials told the workers and their union in a letter that the air concentration of lead in the maintenance hole was high enough to warrant taking corrective action. So that's reporting out of Springfield. Two other points I'll just raise quickly that kind of speak to the hows of this before I bring in the panel. The Bell Phone Company used lead to shield phone lines up until the 1960s. So we're talking about a problem or a situation that's been going on for a while. Friction and disturbances, possibly from people working with tools on those lines, turn the lead into the dust, particulate, that then can fall to the ground or elsewhere. So now we have OSHA has done some sample testing, found these levels that are raising eyebrows. But the path forward here, panel, is not exactly what I would say clear. Dusty Christensen, what did you think when you read this reporting?
The first thing that jumped to my mind was just the impacts that these cuts to federal agencies are going to have on a whole range of workplace and quality of life issues here in our region and beyond. The idea that the Trump administration is seeking to cut back on administrations like OSHA, not to mention the other ones like the Education Department, the National Labor Relations Board, everybody else, is really going to have an impact here. We see that in this one example of agencies which at the moment it seem to be still functioning and doing these reports about the lead that these workers are facing in their jobs. A really scary prospect, but who knows what's going to be happening in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And
for his part, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy has said that the work that is happening at the National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health continues. And although people like Senator Ed Markey have raised concerns about that, and that's part of what came up in Jim Kinney's reporting. Greta, how about for you? What stood out?
Yeah, similar thoughts. Made me think of all the cuts to public health and environment programs, which we've seen in Springfield with the cancellation or termination of a massive EPA grant for environmental justice projects, and just, filed under the another cut to federal government having this, pretty significant impact here in our local community.
Now, Verizon did not comment for Jim Kinney's story. They inherited these lines from the old Bell company, but they have responded in other reporting in the Wall Street Journal. And in that reporting, they called for more research around this issue. And they wrote a New York congressman, Verizon that is, wrote a New York congressman in 2023 saying, quote, soil lead levels near Verizon's cable are similar to lead levels in the surrounding area, i.e. background levels, and do not pose a public health risk to your constituents. Mike Dobbs.
Sure, they're all doctors at Verizon. Listen, this is really huge, because if it's happening, and that's my neighborhood. I live off of Central Street. If it's happening in one old Springfield neighborhood, it's happening all over the place. And I'm sure that Verizon's lawyers probably attended the class where it talked about class action suits. I mean, this is a very big concern for any of our telephone workers who have to go in and keep things running. Now they know that they are at risk at lead exposure. And what is the company really going to do about it except come up with some completely standard boilerplate response of, well, it's the same as the background rates, This is a ticking time bomb for Verizon, by the way.
Matt Szafranski, I'm going to bring you in, and then Greta, I'll go to you quickly. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a couple of moving pieces to this. One is that we've known for a long time that lead, of course, is dangerous, but we have been removing, it from the environment in some ways. There's no lead in gasoline, for example, anymore. But we're not. If we don't have the agencies and the research, broadly speaking, because even if Secretary Kennedy is right and the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health is still functioning, lots of other parts are not, and the information is not coming in there, so we're not getting the comprehensive view of the impact that we really need to understand the impact. And yes, these are things that were done, decades ago, but they stay in our environment, and we need to understand how that's impacting the environment, and it's not entirely clear that we have the capacity to do that anymore. So I think that's going to be one of the big, sleepers as well. We may not know for a long time the full impact because of some of the cuts that have been going on.
Matt, you said, we remove lead from gasoline. I'm also thinking about whenever a house is sold, people have to notify whether or not they are aware of lead paint, perhaps, in that home. And I'm really thinking about the very detailed process by which lead is carefully removed and remediated from situations. And both the workers, there are steps taken to protect both the workers, but also the surrounding area, because this is a particulate. It's particularly challenging for children when it's brought into their systems. And so it's I'm thinking about, even exterminators need to notify people ahead of the work that they're doing in a house, maybe if they're bringing chemicals in. So maybe there's some logic here to Verizon, or when there's going to be work on lines, notifying the people in the area that, look, we know that there might be lead on this line, something for you to be aware of. And then maybe going a step further, is there some type of protective work that needs to be done if or when this lead is being remediated? Greta, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say another concern is that how this issue compounds with others. For example, Springfield has higher than the state average for childhood lead poisoning, and that's most likely due to the extremely old housing stock. So just thinking about how issues with the lead in the soil, with this, what we were just talking about, compounds with other, similar issues.
And health agencies have been consistently lowering the acceptable level of lead in soil and other things down and down and down over the years. It seems abundantly clear that there is no safe level of lead, particularly when it comes to children. Yeah,
and I think Jim Kinney pointed out in his reporting that the EPA says, there is no safe level, but there are certain levels that we look at and when say it's above this is very much a cause for concern.
And Jim's reporting also noted that an issue is cross-contamination as well. I mean, they go from job site to job site. The Verizon workers, that is, they might be tracking some of it home. I mean, there's a complex web of risk that is arising from this situation, and even if there's warnings, at some point you also have to be talking about how do we keep this from spreading from one place to another.
Certainly an area that I suspect Jim Kinney will keep covering, keep reporting on, and we'll keep talking about it here on the Rundown. Dusty, I'm going to move us on to some reporting you did for the Shoestring this week. And the headline, Police DA Make Millions from a Cannabis Bust. Here's how they're spending it. The subheadline, Police seized over 30 luxury cars from an alleged drug trafficker in New Salem. After auctioning many of the cars, they've been busy spending the more than $2 million in proceeds. This story does take us to New Salem, a town in Franklin County, which I always forget is in the 413 because I think of Salem and I think of the eastern part of the state. But for those of you scratching your heads, wondering where New Salem is, it's kind of hugged by the Quabbin Reservoir, the population about 1,000 people. So we're talking about a small community. Quoting your work here, Dusty, it was a case that police billed as one of the region's biggest ever drug busts. The year was 2020, and officers had pulled over Corey Taylor in the town of Pelham, where they said they seized 138 pounds of cannabis from the van the 41-year-old was driving. Taylor made bail and disappeared. 2 months later, his dead body was discovered in a vacant building in Holyoke. In the meantime, police had raided 2 properties they said were connected to Taylor. Soon, prosecutors would begin the legal process of permanently taking that property from Taylor's estate and splitting the proceeds with local police departments. Dusty, what's going on here?
This is a process, and this reporting actually began with a bigger investigation that Greta and I did for the Republican and NEPM, looking into this process of civil asset forfeiture. That is the process by which police, district attorneys are able to seize and in most cases keep property if they're alleging that property is connected to a crime. It's almost always drug trafficking, but there's some other instances. And in Massachusetts, it is easier than in any other state to forfeit somebody's property, to seize and forfeit it. The legal standard here in Massachusetts is probable cause, which is lower than any other state or the federal government now has. All of them have raised the bar. And so it is a controversial practice. And this is a case where there was this bust. Police were alleging that Corey Taylor was a very large cannabis trafficker here in the region. And they were able to successfully seize and forfeit a bunch of luxury cars. But fans of Fast and Furious will maybe be interested to hear that there was a lot of Toyota Supras in that collection. Some of them, I think one sold for as much as $500,000 when the DA ultimately auctioned them. And all that money eventually went to police departments up in Hampshire and Franklin counties because the DA up there, David Sullivan, was the one who forfeited that property. It is very interesting to see what police are spending this money on. We can get into that in a little bit. But it also offers a window onto something that might be happening on an even larger scale soon in Hampden County, because it wasn't just in Franklin County that Corey Taylor had property. He also had a luxury firehouse turned home on Main Street in Holyoke. They're trying to seize that property. And there they found $4 million in cash, a bunch of other vehicles, high-end vehicles, and a whole bunch of jewelry. So that's a process that's still ongoing. His estate has denied that property has any connection to criminal proceedings and are trying to fight the forfeiture of it. That's making its way through Superior Court down in Hampden County.
Matt, I'm going to have you grab your attorney's hat here because I was intrigued by this fact that Dusty raised, that Massachusetts is now the only state where the burden of proof for seizing a person's property is probable cause. What's going on there?
Well, I mean, that means it's at basically the same level as a search warrant, which is one of the lowest bar things that the government. I mean, it's not a extremely low bar, but it's still one of the lowest bars the government has to invade somebody's personal space. Which the thing is that you just need to have reasonable suspicion that a crime occurred. It doesn't have to be substantial evidence or facts that are assumed true. We would sustain the charges, as in the case of the indictment. So I mean that opens up it makes it considerably easier, especially if you have somebody who, if you could have served a warrant on this person, you could hypothetically also be taking their property in connection with a crime. And one of the complications with Mr. Taylor's situation is that I don't believe he was ever convicted of anything because he passed away before that happened. But so some of this might play out a little bit differently if the principal was alive. But it really does raise questions about what the thoroughness is being applied to making sure that these assets are taken and then redistributed to the communities that, in the case of the DA's offices, serve. And I think there are some serious concerns if you don't have, the legal wherewithal, the lawyers and so forth, to resist taking properties that, family or even the principals themselves. I mean, not everybody who is convicted stays in prison forever for drug crimes, could lose property even if it doesn't have a clear connection or a connection that would hold up in any other court or state.
Now, D.A. Sullivan did tell you that this is a rare case, that a case like this would end up in $2 million in proceeds. And tell us a few things just briefly of how these funds were being spent.
It's on a lot of things, and Greta and I found this in cases across the valley when we did our big investigation. Everything from new cars to weapons, surveillance technology. Departments like Hadley and East Hampton spent it on automatic license plate readers, which are pretty controversial in the way that they collect data. By and large, none of these departments were spending it on personnel expenditures. There are departments like Holyoke that has spent a lot of money traditionally on overtime, but these departments had not spent it on that. Largely equipment. DA
and police point out to you that this is the funds are often used on things that they might not otherwise be able to afford. So an important aspect for them to have then pointed that out. We are going to need to take a quick break here. We can continue talking about this topic another day here on The Rundown. When we come back, we will have Dusty Christensen, Greta Jochem, Mike Dobbs, and Matt Szafranski commenting on the week's news. You are listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. The panel's still talking about the last topic. It's a layered and extremely interesting one. I will direct us now to reporting from the Berkshire Eagle this week. It's god-awful. Most Berkshire County nursing homes spend less than $10 a day per person on food. That was the headline reporting by Heather Bello. And she got curious about food expenditures after seeing a series of Facebook posts from a resident at Hillcrest Commons Nursing and Rehab Center. And that resident says the food he's been served lacks balanced nutrition and often arrived cold when it's meant to be hot. Quoting Heather's reporting here, if anyone wonders about the quality or quantity of food served at nursing homes across the country, a look at their financial filings reveals a potential source of the problem: money. The government requires nursing homes to publicly file cost reports detailing their revenue and expenses. These documents show that in the Berkshires, most skilled nursing and rehabilitation facilities spend less than $10 per day per person on food, less than the cost of a fast food meal. And at Hillcrest Commons, where this one gentleman was staying, the average amount spent was $7.98. Greta, you have reported a fair amount on challenges that nursing homes have faced outside of the Berkshires. What's your reaction to this reporting?
I thought this was fantastic analysis from Heather Bello, and it made me think of the time that I was in a Northampton nursing home last summer reporting there, and one woman who I was interviewing, she just really wanted me to bring her some watermelon, which was something she couldn't get from this facility.
Fresh fruit is not common in these settings, right?
Yeah. And I loved that Heather looked at something like we hear stories about staffing at nursing homes, care issues like that, which are critical, of course, and Heather's done great reporting on that. But I really liked this focus on food, which is also super important and huge for quality of life.
And Hillcrest, the particular nursing home where this gentleman was lodging his complaints, has began to work with Casey Clow, the gentleman who pointed out these challenges he's having with the food there. But NEPM's Carrie Healy spoke with reporter Heather Bello about this story. Here's Bello's response to the information that she's received on how the nursing home has responded.
Nursing home owners say that they are struggling to meet all the needs based on what the regulations are for staffing and everything else. And so if they have to spend more in one area, they have to cut in another area. One issue that the nursing home owner has raised with us is that the Medicaid reimbursements don't cover all of the costs.
Medicaid reimbursements, the gap there. We've talked about this problem on this show in the past. Mike Dobbs, the underfunding that the Medicaid, that Hillcrest and other nursing homes say Medicaid is to the tune of almost $50. So something costs X and they're being reimbursed significantly less than that. What are you thinking when you hear this?
Well, as the oldest person in this room and the only one who's on Medicare at this point, I want to tell you this is scary. Not that I hope that I wind up in a nursing home, but it points out that unfortunately nursing homes are simply end-of-life waiting rooms. There's so much emphasis about how much nursing homes cost consumers. And this kind of report is the kind of thing that I think is going to shock a lot of people. They're assuming that their loved ones are getting care, and part of that care is getting decent food. I am not sure what you can get for the amount of money other than green Jell-O and tapioca. And frankly, I like the tapioca, but I draw the line at green Jell-O, okay? But honestly, I hope that what comes out of this is this awareness that this is a huge issue that needs to be addressed. And right now, it's the exact wrong time to address it, since the federal government's attitude toward Medicare is, let's see how much we can cut from it. This is very disturbing.
Well, Heather Bello has detailed reporting on that topic in the Berkshire Eagle. I'm going to take us now for a quick update on a matter we discussed last week, the $20 million grant the Trump administration cut. In brief, that money was meant to improve indoor and outdoor air quality for area residents in Springfield, a place where asthma is a big health concern. Matt, you reported on this for Western Mass Politics and Insight. The city of Springfield is considering ways to recoup that money. What's happening there?
So the way that this particular grant was discussed in some of the various litigation settings that the federal government has been in from cutting funding, and while a judge did allow this particular tranche to be cut, one of the things that the federal government had to include in its rescission was the openness to administrative appeals. I don't know that anybody in the city or the state thinks that that's going to be a particularly productive avenue. So since then, the city has confirmed to me that they are working with the Attorney General's office to figure out ways that they can pursue this through litigation. The Attorney General's office also indicated that it was open to such a path. Basically, my impression from this is that the state has taken the lead on grants that it is the pass-through for, or grants that multiple communities are relying on. So it can appear in court and sue on its own behalf to try to intercede on behalf of the cities and towns. And that appears to be what Springfield and the Attorney General's office are strongly considering, figuring out a way to have this either. I mean, it's possible it could be just Springfield's litigation. City Solicitor Buonaconti said that was very much an option. But it's also possible that it could be part of a larger effort to recoup grants that are at risk or have been cut for other cities and towns, and Springfield's $20 million would be among those.
Fascinating and unique approach to recoup some of these funds that have been taken away by the Trump administration under its attempts to sort of reorient it, how and where it's spending and allocating these federal dollars. All right.
I should just add,
go ahead, Matt.
If I could, just very briefly, this tool that the state has done is sort of kind of been done already. There were some, I can't remember if they were COVID or public health grants, or it could have been both, that were state pass-throughs, and they told municipalities, bill us for reimbursement. We're working on getting the money through the courts. So I think there's some way to kind of see a similarity with that process.
I appreciate you pointing that out. All right. You all may be aware the Memorial Day weekend is ahead of us. It is a time to honor those who died serving and defending our country. And on a far more frivolous note, it's also the unofficial start to summer and that summer season. Mike Dobbs, I know one place you'll probably be headed or directing people to, the Springfield Armory, because I learned in your recent interview for Focus Springfield that you had Kelly Fellner on, the superintendent of the Springfield Army National Historic Site, and you send people there all the time. Why?
Yes, I do, because I'm a big history nerd, and the reason Springfield is here is because of George Washington establishing this as an arsenal. Springfield never saw any battles in the Revolutionary War. The Arsenal site is the top of a plateau from the river. And when it developed into an armory, it also meant that was the spur of our precision manufacturing in the city, attracting many other private enterprises. So yeah, to me, the Armory Museum is very big. In fact, I got to go there and buy a baseball hat for a buddy of mine in Vermont who has worn his out, but he's so happy with his Springfield Armory baseball hat. So yes, it's a big deal.
Single-handedly funding our national parks, Mike Dobbs. Dusty, what are you looking forward to this summer?
Well, it certainly doesn't feel like summer to me. I grew up in Georgia. This cold weather has really got me in a funk. So I think I'm looking forward to finding that warm weather. I usually go up to Vermont in the summer, but might be heading south to warmer pastures.
Gotcha. Greta, how about for you?
Love soaking up all of Western Mass in the summer, the best time to live here. I'm also headed for 4th of July to Vancouver for hiking and exploring with some of my friends, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Matt Szafranski, how do you spend your summer vacation?
Well, usually just relaxing, working, and blogging. But I like Greta, I actually will be going to Canada in a couple of weeks as well. So I'm looking forward to that. I've never been to Toronto before.
Well, that's very interesting and exciting. It is not very 413E, however. No. So last summer I said this, but it's the same for this summer. I spent a ton of time at Jacob's Pillow. I'm a huge fan of dance, but we're also going to be doing a fair amount of outdoor stuff. Our son Logan is certainly old enough and very interested in hiking and enjoying the great outdoors. So we're looking forward to that. All right, Rundowners, time to dish on a story maybe you're working on, make a prediction about the week's news, or heap some praise on a newsworthy nugget. It's our scoop, praise, and prediction portion of the show. Dusty Christensen, I'll start with you.
I hope I'm not getting ahead of this one really quick. I'm a part of the faculty union at University of Massachusetts Amherst, and it seems like our bargaining team has maybe reached a tentative agreement on a contract with the administration. So I want to heap praise on all of the union negotiators out there who are working hard to get contracts for their members.
Praise and potential scoop. Greta, Jochem.
Yeah, the Springfield Republican has a new photographer, Douglas Hook, and his images are fantastic. He started a couple weeks ago, so just praise to Doug and encourage everyone to check him out.
I'm glad you mentioned that. It's something I've been thinking about for this show because photojournalism is such an important part of the work that journalists do. And I've been thinking of a way to find an appropriate way to translate images for the radio. So maybe I can reach out to your team there and we can brainstorm a bit on that topic. Mike Dobbs, how about you? Scoop, praise, prediction?
We're working on a whole bunch of programs for Focus Springfield. In fact, one including Mr. Christensen over there. Personally, I have a book to finish. I think I'm about 6 weeks away from delivering the manuscript, so I feel good about that.
Can you give us a little bit more? Tell us a bit more. What is the book about?
Being an old man and facing death, I'm doing all these projects I had started as a young man. So this is a book about an actor named Tom Tyler. You don't know who he was, but he was a B Western star in the 1930s that then developed a whole second career as a character actor in A movies. Had a very unusual career arc. I just watched him. I watched him last night in Samson and Delilah, the 1949 Cecil B. DeMille biblical film. He plays a bit as a Philistine who's torturing Samson. And I started this when I was an undergraduate at UMass.
Wow.
Many years ago. So I'm finishing up things so I can die with clear conscience.
I love that's the importance of keeping that file of things that I'm working on.
Yes.
And I love that you're bringing that full circle. Matt Szafranski, what have you got going on? Scoop, praise, prediction?
I'm working on a piece that will bring a local Western Mass connection to some of the attempts to arrest students for their political activities. It's not typical for some of the other ones, but it still has the same weighty legal and constitutional implications.
Certainly an issue that will be very interesting to bring to the fore. I have praise today for our Rundown crew. I do not do credits often enough, so our credits are: the Rundown anthem is by the Love Crumbs. Our director is Tony Dunn. Our board op is Phil Bishop. Our engineers are Kara Foster, Betsy Langto, Art Rankin, and Chuck Dubé. Production support and digital by IU Suryawan. If you have thoughts, you can email therundown@nepm.org. My thanks to this week's panel: Dusty Christensen, Greta Jochem, Mike Dobbs, and on the phone, Matt Szafranski. I'm Carrie Saldo. You have been listening to The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM. Enjoy Memorial Day.